All right, so our whole idea here, though, is to focus this moon charting on our creative energy and rhythms. And so a lot of people will do moon charting, they'll really be looking at physical needs or emotional needs, and all of that's relative to our creative energy, of course. But what I'd like for you to think about as likely artists or simply soulful creatives, right? And really having this idea of the wholeness of what creative process and creative practice can bring into our awareness, into our consciousness, and how we show up. Is to first start by making yourself a little brainstorm list of words that describe feelings, moods, or states that you often experience in relation to your creativity or your creative practice. Okay, so I'm going to just do this in my little journal here, and these could be, I'll give you some ideas. Common ones like, resistance, hello, we talk about it all the time, right? Flow, or like, in the zone. What are moods and things that you tend to feel when you're doing your creative practice, your creative work? Sometimes I feel focused, sometimes I feel scattered or unfocused. Sometimes I love getting into like detail work. It can be so cathartic. And other times I need to be like, there needs to be like a real release of energetic quality. It's not very detailed necessarily. It might even look a little chaotic, but it feels like such an important release of that creative energy. Sometimes it looks like, for me, a lot of stops and starts. Sometimes it's really excited, and sometimes it's really quiet, or like it's like quiet within me. Sometimes it feels really tender or vulnerable. So what are words that describe how you often feel in your creative practice or in your creative energy? Ways that you may approach it. Sometimes I procrastinate. And then sometimes once I'm in it, I'm really, it goes back to kind of being in the zone, but there's like a timelessness. So you could just take a few minutes and kind of write down some words that make sense to you. Sometimes other words I might use for it feels emotional. This might be connected to tender or vulnerable, energetic and chaotic. I might also say active. Sometimes I feel really analytical or critical. That's the word, right, guys? Or kind of in my headspace. And sometimes it feels so ineffable, so indescribable. I wonder what the word is for that. It feels like I'm seeking, like I'm looking for something. Sometimes that shows up. So what does your creative energy look like? The idea, though, is to like hold these things and try not to have judgment about them, right? So even though we can be critical sometimes, can we notice that we can be critical without being judgmental about the fact that we get critical? All right. So once you have a list of those, pick 5 to 10 of those words that you're going to use to focus on for this first month. And so you pick 5 to 10 words that are going to be your focus ones, and then you may want to write them over on your chart here so that you remember what you're working with. And you could actually make a code for them if you want. You could give a symbol for each that then you fill in the space with. So I tend to use words actually in my charts each month. And then the other thing I wanted to say about charting how you feel at the end of each day is that you might break up your day into 2 periods or 3. And that can actually be really revealing, because maybe you felt one way in the morning, but a totally different way around noon or lunchtime, and a totally different way at night after the kids went to bed. So really tracking that can show you what your prime times are throughout the time of the day as well. So I'm hoping you are beginning to see the way that we can see layers, whether it's the days of the week, the course of the month, the moon phases themselves, or possibly even the times of the day. And then my focus words, you could actually write those in the center if you want, or if you have a project that you're focusing on or a goal, like I'm going to do 1 art journal spread per day, and you're really working on that creative daily habit sort of idea, write that in the center. Let that be your focus. Or what is your why for this thing that you're focusing on in your creative practice. It doesn't have to be something that completely resolves in the month, but why is leaning toward this creative practice or using your creative energy consciously, why is it important to you? Okay, so I went ahead and added my words to my chart for this next month, and I think I added a couple others. So I have resistance, flow, focused, scattered, active, slow, quiet, vulnerable, critical, seeking, inspired. All right. Now these words could be turned into verbs, for instance, if you want to play with that rather than them being nouns. But also, what I want to say is that you can simultaneously feel, more than one. Like sometimes you can feel vulnerable without it feeling like it was a time of it being critical, for instance, or sometimes it can be active and quiet, right? So I will write sometimes multiple words in to give me an indicator. And the other thing that would be a really simple way of bringing in symbols, and this, when I do symbols on my moon charts or my calendar, I do keep it really, really simple because it helps me remember what the heck they mean, right? So I'll use a heart if it feels very heart-centered or it's touched something kind of deep in me that's hard to explain. I'll use a star if it's something that just felt awesome. Like if I was really in this like vulnerable place, that still could feel really awesome because maybe there was some insight there or it was also inspiring, right? So, and then I use an X if it just feels like, something was not working, right? So it was slow, but it was not necessarily an awesome slow. It was a slow, right? And if it's just kind of blah, like if it's kind of just neutral for me, then I don't use an additional symbol. Like that just kind of comes without going. These are kind of extreme states of experiencing those creative energy feelings that we can have with our creative practice and how we may or may not show up. So that is an idea of how to begin your little coding system for your tracking each day, what your creative energy is like. So decide for this month if you're going to do it just as the overall mood for the day, or if you're going to try to split it up into like a morning time and an evening time, for instance, to see if it changes throughout the day, because that can be really insightful as well.